Welcome to the Elvis Presley channel. Elvis helped bridge the gap that could have existed in American music till now. He helped make music become truly universal, but that's not all he did. Elvis Presley served his country as a soldier, and boy did he do a good job of it. Even as parents derided his sultriness and boldness in his songs, after his service, they came to view him in another perspective. How was Elvis used as a weapon in the war? Make sure to watch the video until the end, and if you're new here, don't forget to join our wonderful community by subscribing to the channel. Elvis becoming a symbol of rebellion is only natural. After all, he owed his musical genius to the rebellious attitude he had when he was younger. In a conservative time where such was considered unsavoury, Elvis listened to the sultry songs of the minority African-American artists. The African-American big names like Turner, Crudup and Thornton all inspired Elvis and the way they moved on stage and the lyrics to their songs. It could make a religious man's heart flush with exasperation. Elvis rebelled against the norm and visited African-American clubs even though he was a white guy. The East Trigg Avenue Baptist Church had a regular visitor in him. His rebellion transcended his teenage years into his whole life. One of the notable acts of rebellion was when he went on TV, the Ed Sullivan television show, and he started thrusting his hips into the air. Just like that, a riot happened as the studio audience went apoplectic with fury. The studio execs were driven mad by what they equated to blasphemy showing before them. They ordered that the cameras show him performing from the waist up. They were certain that Elvis's gyrating hips would corrupt the innocent minds of the American youths. Elvis couldn't get what the fuss was. These movements are what the artists that inspired him to his style used to do. To him it was a natural part of how he performed. As he said when he got back from his military service and got barraged by news people, "I'm going to sing and I'll let the shaking come naturally. If I had to stand still and sing, I'd be lost. I can't get any feeling that way." And he kept that promise. Those sexy hips wouldn't be bound by authority. They were a sign of what freedom meant to Elvis. He was a nexus between two worlds. Through him, the taste of the American audience to music expanded. Songs that may not have been as popular were popular because Elvis covered them. Hound Dog, That's All Right Mama, Glad You're Mine, My Baby Left Me, All Shook Up, Don't Be Cruel, Return to Sender, and more were songs that reached the highest levels because Elvis sang them. Some of these songs were written by African Americans, and while these artists had already performed some, Elvis only covered the songs. Hound Dog was Big Mama Thornton's song. Otis Blackwell wrote songs, some of them like All Shook Up, Return to Sender, and Don't Be Cruel. There were other songs he covered, such as Fats Domino's Ain't That a Shame, Ray Charles's What I'd Say, and Roy Hamilton's Unchained Melody. All of these songs did well on the charts, and they allowed people to discover the brilliance that the African-American minority had. Although this led to a big controversy and assertions that Elvis was a thief and an appropriator. However, these talks didn't much faze Elvis, as he continued to do what he loved and experienced the freedom from singing what his idols had sung. However, too much freedom could lead to anarchy, or, in Elvis's case, the finality of death. Elvis was a rebel, but sometimes even rebels need to know there are lines you don't cross at all, or don't cross excessively. Although there is a way stardom makes stars love the forbidden taste of excessiveness. Elvis didn't smoke and wasn't a heavy drinker. He didn't even buy the renowned German beer when he was stationed with the 3rd Armoured Division in Germany. Unfortunately, he had taken a fancy to pills. Being in the army significantly increased his use of amphetamines due to Elvis's excuses that such drugs gave him energy and allowed him to lose weight. He had been using amphetamines before he got into the army. It was a habit he picked up from his beloved Ma. Ironically, the danger that would be one of the factors for her son's short life would come from her. Elvis's mum used to take appetite-suppressant Dexedrine for weight loss purposes. As Lamar Fike, Elvis's bodyguard, reported, Elvis got his first uppers from what he stole from his mother. Elvis would see the drug lying around and felt if his mama could take it, so could he. The buzz he got from that drug would create a hunger for more. The truth he wasn't telling himself was drugs helped him cope with pressures. In the army, he used his wealth to get pet pills, at least according to the people who hung around him in Germany. Presley would bribe an army pharmacist and preach to his friends that these would allow them to stay alert and not feel fatigued. Many of his friends joined him in using the substances and helped them with the supply. Rex Mansfield confessed to being one of the beneficiaries of these amphetamines, or uppers, or pet pills as they called them. After the army, Presley wanted to explore, experiment and get drugs that would give him a real kicker. He moved on to the other big boys, opiates, tranquilizers and barbiturates. His habit was so terrible that in 1970, about 10 years since he left the army, he got an impromptu invite to visit President Nixon. Elvis got an honorary Drug Enforcement Administration agent's badge during that visit. Also during that visit, Presley was high on his drugs. How ironic, don't you think? And so Presley's problem would continue until it wasn't a problem. Death cures all problems in the end. Elvis's heart could no longer take the abuse, and it gave out. Snuffing the light from the star's eyes, his legend would continue to live on. Like every other dutiful American young man, Elvis performed his patriotic and legal responsibility to put his name down as a potential soldier under the Selective Service System on January 8, 1953, when he turned 18. This would make him available to be drafted. At that time the Korean War was reaching its end, but his status as a model student of the L.C. Humes High School, Memphis, helped him get a student deferment, which would keep him in America until the Korean War ended. He missed the draft that time, but after a few years Uncle Sam came calling. No one says no to Uncle Sam, even the most rebellious person. On the 20th of December 1957, a few days before Christmas, the Memphis Draft Board announced that Elvis had been selected under the Selective Service System to serve in the military for active duty of 2 years and an additional 4 years in the reserves. This news shook the whole entertainment industry as a whole, as Elvis was the newest musical sensation, the face of rock and roll. His fans didn't want him to join the army. Who would give them that sweet sound they had become accustomed to? Many feared his rising career would stagnate and advised him to join the military's special service. Fans even sent letters to the army to pressure them to exempt their sweetheart, but at the suggestion of his manager, Elvis did what he did best. Rebelled against his fans. He decided that he would not only join the military, but also do so like a regular Joe. Even sections of the military lobbied for Elvis's membership. The Navy and Air Force were disappointed when Elvis announced he would reject their special offers. The Navy offered him his very own company, which would be specially trained and called the Elvis Presley Company. The Air Force had its vision to use Elvis's soaring popularity to drive recruitment into the Air Force. His manager, Colonel Tom Parker, insisted and convinced Elvis that going to the Army as a regular guy would pay off for his career, but it was in Elvis's hands. The Colonel told Elvis, "Stay a good boy and do nothing to embarrass your country." It was easier said than done. The Colonel took a big gamble there, but he was confident in his star's level-headedness. Although his induction was deferred because he was shooting a film at the time, King Creole. On the day of his induction, the 24th of March 1958, Elvis's face was set. His strong jaw had a determination to it, his dressing immaculate as usual. He was made for the army. In contrast to his air of confidence, his mother looked like a nervous wreck. His bright eyes contrasted the dark circles that slept beneath hers. She appeared to have cried from the night in the morning. Her sweet boy was off to join the army. Elvis's mum had always protected him fiercely, and the fact she could eat into her fiercely. One could say this was one of the things that led to her sickness and eventual death. Her son was her anchor, and Uncle Sam had taken him away. The day of the induction was a highly publicised one, and as Elvis stepped out of his Graceland home at 6 that morning, the photographer his manager hired began his work. The ride to the induction centre was short, and Elvis joined the other drafted members in downtown Memphis. Elvis went through the routine checks, his beautiful styled hair bad to go. The army had a length to which hair must not pass, and Elvis was no exception. At first, that is, later, the army allowed him to keep it 3 centimetres above regulation. After losing his beautiful coiffed pompadour, Elvis croaked, "Hair today, gone tomorrow." The army fed him a sandwich. Shortly after, he took a nap, and 4 days after he landed at Fort Hood, Texas, and was assigned to the 2nd Armored Division's Hell on Wheels. His arrival at that base garnered more media attention, so much for trying to be a regular soldier. He trained for 6 months and was given weekend leave, allowing him to see his mum, whose health worsened shortly after he left. He also got 2 weeks, which allowed him to record 5 songs. Also, he got an emergency free day on August 14th, which allowed him to be with his beloved mother in the final hours of her life. His mother would die on the 16th of August, and it was one of the most gut-wrenching events for Elvis. He would bawl like a child, tears flowing freely down his cheeks during the burial. His friend Judy Spreckles, who was there during the burial, said, "I have never seen anyone as sad as Elvis was. He cried continuously. We were in the front hall at Graceland, and he stood there hugging me for half an hour. He was crying and crying and crying. It was the saddest thing I'd ever seen." Soon after, Presley would return to base, where he would be shipped overseas to Germany to join Company D, 32nd Tank Battalion, 3rd Armoured Division in Friedberg for the remainder of his duty. It was the only overseas travel Elvis made all his life. He never passed the USA, and on 5 occasions he visited Canada. His deployment to Germany was a fanfare. Usually no one bothers when a new soldier arrives, but the new deployment didn't have a sensation like Elvis. The press gathered to interview him on the 2nd day of his arrival. A journalist noted that the press conference put together for Elvis that day was close to one a President of America would receive. Trained in the art of handling the press, the media-crowned king of rock and roll maintained his civility even if the questions appeared dumb. His time in Germany was filled with more periods that pointed out that Elvis wasn't your average Joe. While he did his duties diligently and remained good, well, mostly a good boy, as his manager instructed, his stardom influenced his duties. The only time Elvis was put on guard duty, he was almost mobbed, so that fellow soldiers had to come to guard the guard. At another time, he had to be reassigned from being the driver to company commander, Captain Russell, who got frustrated with how Elvis brought attention he didn't want on him. Soon he was reassigned from his jeep driver position to a scout platoon. While he enjoyed his training in the base, especially the part that dealt with tank driving, he terribly missed his family, and he arranged that they come to join him in Germany. Unlike a regular soldier, he could live off base and afford to rent different hotels. He had a brief hotel stay in Hotel Grunwald with his family, but he later got a house. In that house there was a party almost every night he returned there. There were impromptu jam sessions and girls who wanted to be with the future king of pop. As his bodyguard, Lamar Fikes, would note, Elvis always kept his own world with him. He kept his own bubble. As an introverted child, he relied on his family frequently, and they helped him centre himself. So Elvis could afford to eat in his house. Usually he came from the base to eat lunch and returned to base to continue his duties. Elvis would get on with his duties well and earned the respect of his fellow soldiers in his unit, even though he had many benefits they didn't have. He was generous to them, ensuring they had extra fatigues and TV sets. Also, he helped some get access to pet pills. The army also used Elvis's presence to their benefit. When they wanted to perform a special ceremony, the relocation of a stone memorial that bore the name of World War I veterans, they used Elvis for photo props. He didn't even take part in the actual carrying. They just wanted Elvis to pose with the stone. For the enemies on the other side of the German wall and the Soviets, Elvis was a weapon of war. They believed America brought him there to sway the minds of the youth in East Germany. This generated some tension between the United States and Eastern Germany with their Soviet allies. They had seen the king's hip-thrusting dance, and they knew him as a rebel. He was a threat. Will Stoff, the Eastern Germany defense minister, acknowledging the threat that Elvis posed, said that Presley and his music offered the means of seduction to make the youth ripe for atomic war. The Eastern Germans felt that they had come up with their response to the United States' use of Elvis as a weapon. The Communist Party leader of East Germany at the time said that it was not enough to reject the capitalist decadence with words, to speak out against the ecstatic singing of someone like Presley, we have to offer something better. And so East Germany developed its own dance, the Lipsy dance, and honestly, they shouldn't have bothered. Eastern Germans didn't even like the dance, and it never became popular. People only remembered the dance as an object of mockery. Elvis's military service was necessary for him to find love. It was there he found the woman he would later marry, Priscilla Beaulieu. He courted her for a longer period on account of their age difference, and the two would later tie the knot. Elvis would return from his service, and he was given a hero's welcome by his fans. They missed him and asked him why he chose to serve the regular way. He said, "I was in a funny position. Actually, that's the only way it could be. People were expecting me to mess up, to goof up in one way or another. They thought I couldn't take it, and so forth, and I was determined to go to any limits to prove otherwise, not only to the people who were wondering, but to myself." His career picked up from there where he left it, even though new acts came along. No one could replace the King. For Elvis, his time in the army was not an easy one, despite the fact that he wasn't an average soldier. But what was Elvis Presley's biggest obstacle in life? Find out from this video.